On this episode of Imagine, Create, Inspire.
I don't create art for the audience. I try to do things, and sure, everybody wants validation.
Right.
But, a lot of things that I create, and I've got a studio full of them that I don't know if they'll ever sell. I don't know if anybody will ever like them. But it's irrelevant. It's of me, for me, by me. That sort of deal. If you get
That's
someone
one step above inventory.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You are listening to Imagine, Create, Inspire, the podcast. Join host Bruce Andrews in conversations with creatives. Every artist has a story, and the struggle is real to stay inspired and in the flow. Join in the conversation by leaving us your comments, and thanks for listening.
I got my friend Scott Owen, professional artist, with me today. We're going to just have a little chat about accessing the imagination and trying to get over into the muse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Our credo here at the Shelby County Arts Council is 3 words in a very deliberate sequential order: imagine, create, and inspire. 3 words in a very deliberate sequential order: imagination leads to creation, creation leads to inspiration, and inspiration, when properly applied, produces hope. And hope is a commodity. Hope is fuel for the human soul, and we don't have enough of it sometimes. The opposite of imagination, creation, and inspiration would probably be stagnation, inflammation, and polarization. So, as artists, as creatives, I feel like we're drivers in society and culture in a very positive way. But in order to be creative, you got to access that imagination, right, Scott?
Absolutely.
It's a challenge sometimes, ain't it?
Depends on who you're asking. Some people are way over. Some of us have to work at it a little bit.
What do you mean by that, man?
Well, some people can just kind of fall into it. I think I can only speak for myself. After years and years and years of just kind of making things, I kind of have figured out a way to turn it off and turn it on.
You mean like just turn on the creative
spark? I kind of, just like a guy that works out every day. If he works out every day, his muscles get bigger, and he learns how to use his muscles the way he wants to. I feel like the creative muscle is just that. It's just a creative muscle that we learn to use it, learn to turn it on, turn it off. And the problem that I see is that society doesn't always allow us to do that. So as a creative person, we're doing things that are different than the typical person that's maybe working in an office and doing redundant things every day. I'm not doing anything that's redundant, not too redundant anyway. So
right.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I mean.
So you think it maybe all the ways we have to numb our minds these days, or to get comfortably numb, like
absolutely.
Pink Floyd says,
comfortably numb. Yeah.
Maybe like scrolling through other people's content probably is not the way to access your imagination.
No, I don't think so, to access your imagination. I think what it does, though, because I find myself doing it too, it does, we somehow it's got to trigger certain things. Triggers things for me visually. I've seen things, this is the way this guy does this, or this way guy does this. I'm always looking for the opposite of what everybody else is doing. And so when you think about it in the visual arts,
you're kind of like a voyeur out there.
I'm trying to find the hole. Yeah, I'm trying.
That's okay, man.
I'm just trying to find that hole that no one else is swimming in, and then see what you can come up with creatively in that particular area.
Kind of make your own ecosystem out there, in cyberspace and otherwise.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it.
Well, everybody might not know much about you. So, if you can say that in 10,000 words or less.
In 10,000 words or less. Well, I'm a local boy. I grew up here, Shelby County. Inspired by a mom that always encouraged me and she bought drawing materials and this kind of thing for me. And when I was in high school here, I was the guy that did all of the backdrops for the plays and the run-throughs for the football players and this kind of thing. And, so that was the encouragement.
You were the guy back in elementary school and high school, they'd say, give it to Scott. Scott can draw.
Scott can do it. Yeah, that was my job.
Yeah, I was kind of that guy too.
So, so anyway, we, maybe after that I went to college, didn't know what else to do. And
so did you go to school in the arts per se?
I did. It was just one of those things. It was back in the day, there wasn't any art in high school when I was there. Yeah. It was, so when I went to college, went to local University of Montevallo, and I just, what are you going to be? What are you going to do? Well,
Montevallo Liberal Arts College.
Liberal Arts College. I wasn't good at math. I wasn't good at, those weren't the things that interest me. So I just, set an art out for an art degree and took some classes and kind of fell in love with process, And then while I was in school.
You want to just take a second there and sort of put a pin in that and tell folks what you mean by process?
Yeah, we grow. You know, I
a
always
lot of
thought,
artists, they're not down with the whole process. It's different every time. So what do you mean by that?
Well, everything is whether it's a drawing or if you're making a pot or doing sculpture or whatnot. There's a process to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think it's possible that most people think that art is just this thing that just magically appears.
He's so artistic.
Yeah, he's so artistic
so
that it's all about talent, and it is somewhat about some talent. I'll give it that, but it's so much more about the process, about how you're going to do things. You know, the talent comes up maybe with an ability to draw and to be able to look at something and then convey it onto a piece of paper or whatnot. I can see where that talent and I was lucky. I had
easier access to the right side of the brain.
Absolutely,
than others.
absolutely. And then, but the rest of it is the work. It's 90% work. You know, it's
That's what
that
you
old
know,
thing.
process.
Yeah, it's the process and it's the work. But I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed the process of drawing whatever it was that was in my imagination.
Yeah.
And then, but I think all too often most people think, well, that's where it stops. No, real art goes on. Then the next 90% is what gets to that thing that we can stand back in awe and go, wow, what did it take to really
man.
do that? That's the thing.
That's the truth, ain't it?
Yeah. So, as much as it's wonderful to draw and to do all these other things, it's the work ethic, I think, that goes behind it. I
think that's why I like our motto, our credo so much.
Yeah.
In the imagine, create, and inspire. It sounds so poetic, but what's not poetic about it?
Mm-hmm.
The imagination part's the fun part.
It is the fun part.
The creation part is the process.
It's tough. I've been watching Nelson do
and
this.
the process involves failure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Lots of tiny failures.
A lot of them. Yeah, it's and then if you don't have anybody to kind of bump up against and go, hey, what do I do here? What do I do there?
Do you remember a time in your creative process, because you're a professional graphic artist and sign maker, and
Mm-hmm.
you run a CNC machine and you can do expressionist art, which to me is two worlds colliding. I mean, you got the CNC machine, the highly analytical process that you program your artwork into or whatever, and then as an expressionist artist, you're just freaking going nuts.
Yeah.
And getting into that loose creative mode and laying it down. So do you remember a time, or can you relate how failure leads to the next step to what you might consider a successful piece?
Yeah, go back 10 years ago when I really started making art instead of focusing everything on the commercial side of my business.
Commercial meaning in general,
people
are ordering stuff,
ordering things, and this is what we do, and you work through the process with them, or at least the creative process. Or this is what we're going to do. These are the materials that we're going to use. This is how it's going to look. Show them another photograph of something that's similar, and go, this is kind of what you're going to get, and this is what it's going to cost.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that, but when I started painting, I went completely in the other direction, and then. And started doing all this really loose stuff. Just try to find whatever materials I could get, everything from oil paints to mixed media to dirt and gravel or whatever that you could do that it's going to try to create something.
So you're just like fearlessly applying stuff to see what happens.
See what happens.
Yeah.
And so throughout the past 10 years or so, things have changed. And so I've gone back, and somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized that all of this that I had learned prior to that, using the equipment you're talking about, and some of the old sign painting techniques that I'd learned back into my 20s, and when I was lucky enough to apprentice under some masters and this kind of thing, I thought, man, I could use that in this artwork, but I just got to have to mix the two together.
Not to make you forget your track of how you're tracking, but I know that people will be wondering, because this learning from the masters. You're talking about sign painting.
Yeah, sign artists that were true masters. I don't know if anybody realizes how much what that craft was up until maybe the 90s, or mid 80s.
It's an art form, right?
It was an art form.
I mean, literally.
There were few, and by the time that I came along and got involved with it in the early to mid 80s, the craft had almost died nationally.
Do you think it was made popular or had some a popularity boost in pop art revolution and all that stuff? Maybe, I don't know.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I think that the pop art changed the way in which sign work was looked at.
Yeah.
Everything became much
Because it didn't
more
fade
commercial.
it didn't really fade till the 50s.
That's right.
And
It faded in the 50s when all the pop art came in. And you're asking me a question I don't really ever thought about. But the guys, there was a guy from Alabama, as a matter of fact, named Chester Cunningham, that was really doing some cool stuff. Wrote a book. He was using those bright colors, those types of things he was using in sign work.
Mm-hmm.
Up until that point, sign work was pretty much, do you want it to be an arch or do you want it to be a straight line, and do you want it to be block letters or script? There wasn't anything else. After the 60s, maybe the 70s and the 80s, when we saw so much design work being done, and you were seeing it on album covers and this kind of thing, it started to play its way into the sign world. And now everything is a logo or everything is a design. There's very little other than information signage.
Yeah.
Everything that's commercially done for a business or an entity or whatnot, how do we use our brand and use our logo and this kind of thing. So all that sort of blended together.
Yeah.
But what happened, and I was a part of this, is that once computers came along in the late 80s, early 90s, they were able to produce designs that you didn't have a mechanical way to, you could create a design.
Copy and paste.
You couldn't copy and paste. There was none of that. There wasn't a machine that was going to produce anything.
Right.
So we were getting things from ad agencies and they said, can you do this? Can you paint this? Can you do? So we would have to physically recreate it, down to trying to match paints to Pantone colors and all of these technical things that no one does, because you've got a machine that will print it out perfectly. Whatever you see on the screen is then printed out immediately. So all of that's gone away. And so what I found in my artwork, going back to that, is all of these processes that I'd learned doing those kind of things, now I can turn around and apply them to my art. And I think it's, if I'm answering the question correctly, it's those processes where there was mixing paint.
Right.
I'm using a lot more flatness in my work now that was much more sign-like that would have been back in the 70s and 80s and 90s.
That's why I brought up pop art. A lot of the stuff that your latest work has got a lot of exciting flat color overlays.
A lot of flat color overlays, and that's where I'm at right now. I don't know that's where it's going to be a year from now or next week.
That's what makes it exciting.
But that's kind of the genre that I'm working in right now, and it's exciting for me because it does incorporate all of these things that I've learned in my past, and I'm not just being completely expressive.
Yeah,
I love that, and they're a lot of fun to do. They're actually a lot more fun to do as far as process, because it happens kind of quickly, and you're just kind of letting yourself go and do those kind of things. Whereas the work that I'm doing now, it's really much more about coming up with a design and working through that design without my client helping me.
Yeah.
And so it's a drawing that maybe I take and I may scan it into my computer, and I may play with color, and I may play with shape, I may add line, I may add.
So this
shape.
whole idea of the muse, I mean, in your case, you start grinding, and maybe the muse or whatever you want to call it comes to visit. The creative juices start flowing once you get into the concept that you.
Yeah, everything starts with an idea.
Because you did a whole series of work to kind of shift gears a little bit, but yet related. You did a whole series of work that for you was a new thing to go to this. What was that show in Texas?
I did the other art fair out in Dallas.
So that thing's huge. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the other art fair is presented by Saatchi Art, which is an online seller, marketplace for art. They're the largest in the world. Based from, I think it originated with the Saatchi Gallery in London.
Yeah.
So then Charles Saatchi, if I'm telling you correctly. Then they had the idea of the online thing, and so now they're the largest
You got a
seller
name
of
like
art.
Saatchi, man.
Yeah, a name like Saatchi. You know, what are you just supposed to do?
It's destiny.
So
you know.
yeah, so
You know, just saying, right, Phil?
Yeah.
You got a name like Saatchi.
So
Saatchi.
Saatchi.
Yeah.
So
You're gonna be
anyway,
something.
they started this thing back, I don't know how many years ago.
It was huge. It was a big step out for you. I mean, you had to get your stuff ready, and your stuff's big.
Yeah, my
and then
stuff's
you had to get it all the way to
large.
Texas.
You had to take it to Texas. So yeah, it was producing the work. Well, this is the funny thing is of course, COVID had happened last year. I was supposed to be in the show last year. I thought this was going to be my big breakout year. It was going to be 2020, and I was going to finally kind of make that shift from as much
So
commercial
y'all heard what he
work.
said, right? I mean, Scott, you've been in the art business for 30-something
Yeah,
years.
I'm gonna-
and,
yeah.
and it's going to be his big breakout
I
year.
mean, my breakout
so, I mean,
year.
you know, folks out there should not hold their breath for
No. Well, I mean, I've been lucky though. I've been
Just keep
really
grinding.
lucky. I mean, I've been lucky to I've designed
You have found a way to
logos.
make a living.
I found a way to make a living with a pencil. Exactly.
that's right.
So, but then I thought, well, I was going to be able to. This was going to be my thing. So anyway, COVID happened and all the shows kind of shut down, and so kind of the pieces that I were going to take were large pieces, and I'd done them. But then when I realized within a couple of months of the time that I was supposed to go this time, that I wanted to take newer work.
Yeah.
And I'd started a few things, and so I finished up a whole bunch of new work, and it had to fill the space. That was the other thing with these types of venues. You've got a certain space, and I really thought
And you got to be feeling a little bit of competitive anxiety. I mean, I know you're not competitive with other artists, but yet you're going to be. It's like getting dressed in public.
Hey, it's
you know
all
what I mean, in front of
new
all
to
these
me.
people,
Yeah,
you know.
it was all it's completely new to me.
So I mean, because I know folks listen to this, that they're artists. They feel that, whether they admit it or not, feel a little bit of. Maybe some competitive anxiety.
Luckily, I had already done five solo shows up to this point. I'd never done an event show. I've never even had an outdoor show or done any of this kind of thing.
These people are serious artists.
These are serious artists. These are people that are working. I mean, some of the people that I met are working, for, their works for major galleries.
You told me just tell the people or tell me because there was one story you told me about. Those kind of example of what you're talking about that. Some artists that were there invited you to their studio.
Oh gosh, yeah. There were some. There were the booth next to me, the space next to me. Just talking. I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." They said their studio was within about a mile or so. Of where
and
we
is
were
in Dallas or Fort
This
Worth?
is in Dallas, just
Yeah.
downtown Dallas. So
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, I'd love to come see it." So I got up on Saturday morning. They said, "Yeah, we'll meet you over there about 10:00." So I drive over and I walk into this place, guys. It was something like it had been a gallery. And they had converted into their studio. So it's one of these spaces
Like a palace.
Like a palace. And I walked in and said, "Oh God!" I said, "You're spoiled forever." I mean, it's 5,000 square feet. Four people shared the space. Had a deck on top of the building.
Had a masseuse on
that
staff
they could
or something.
sort of, and but just elaborate. But they're pretty smart group of people, the way in which they're handling their business of art. And that's what I was impressed with. The space was beautiful, don't get me wrong. And they host their own gallery parties there and this kind of thing, which bring other people into.
So aside from all the fun, and you sold some work,
Yeah.
which is cool, and that was definitely one of the objectives. Did you feel like you learned anything about the business of art, per se?
Sure. First thing I learned is am I going in the right direction? That was the thing I didn't know.
So you went there for some little self-validation.
Yeah, absolutely. Am I going in the right direction? Does the work that I'm producing right now, does it have an audience? That was the biggest question for me. And
that's a great. I want to repeat. Does the work I'm producing have an audience?
Does it have an audience? Yeah.
I mean, that's the question
Not
of the
that
age.
it has to be. Not that it has
It
to have
doesn't
an
have to
audience.
appeal to everybody, Scott.
No, it doesn't.
You appeal to one dude out there that's like turned on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I had a lot of positive
Yeah.
types of things, but it doesn't have to be. I don't create art for the audience. I try to do things, and sure, everybody wants validation.
Right.
But a lot of things that I create, and I've got a studio full of them that I don't know if they'll ever sell. I don't know if anybody will ever like them. But it's irrelevant. It's of me, for me, by me. That sort of deal. If you get
that's
someone
one
that
step
comes,
above inventory.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, because that's one cold-hearted way to look at, well, man, I got all this inventory. And it's
No.
not just that. It's pieces of your heart and soul. It's a record of your failures and successes. It's all of that.
It's
kinda
all of
rolled
that.
up into one ball.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. It's
You never know when one
I
of
don't
those.
know. I mean, the work I'm selling, some of the work that is sold in our little gallery in Montevallo recently are works that I produced 5, 6, 7 years ago that I never knew if they would ever have a home. And it was irrelevant, but I produced them just the same. And that's what I found out through the things that I've sold through Saatchi or some other galleries that I've been associated with, that they find their place in time.
Right.
But our job as an artist,
that's a good sentence.
Yeah.
They find their place in time.
in time, yeah, our job is just to produce.
And if we're lucky, that time will be before you die.
Yeah, well, if you want to buy something with it, yeah.
I mean, with all due respect to
Yeah.
Leonardo da Vinci and Caravaggio and all those guys,
Yeah.
we'd like to get some before we die.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you on that,
I mean, I
man.
think that's part of it. It's not all of it. For me, now, and I can't speak for everybody else. I really work hard at keeping the production of art and the business of art separate from one another.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And the reason is I don't think the two can go together. For example, and I use this as an example, if I wanted to make something to sell, I would make pencils. Everybody needs a pencil,
Yeah.
And so that's the production of something to sell, and I know that I've got a quote unquote an audience, or I have a
Right.
consumer for it. If we're making art that is of us, by us, for us.
Yeah.
Then it is what it is, and it may never have a customer, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a place, and that place it may be hanging on my studio wall, it may be in a show, it may be something that never does anything but just get shown, and it may never get shown, but to get caught up in the business of selling it, that's an entirely different thing, because that will change in my case, it will change the way what I would choose to produce. Then at that point, you want to start looking on Instagram and looking on Facebook and looking at all these places, saying, where do I line up?
Yeah.
And that you're doing yourself an injustice. What you have to do is you have to say, okay, there's only one me.
Yeah.
There's only my set of gifts, my set of talents, my set of experiences. Those are the things that no one else has.
Right.
Use those things,
Right.
and then see what comes out of that. That's the kitchen I'm working in when I'm working in my studio. These are the tools that I have at my disposal, whether it's a CNC machine that someone may not have, or if it's knowing how to draw a straight line with a brush, which I had a lot of experience doing when I was doing sign work by hand years ago. So that's what's in my toolbox, and that's going to be different than what you may have or what someone else may have, and we're going to create different things. That's what makes it art. Otherwise, we're just producing stuff. In the United States, that's a different thing.
What you did was give me a longer expanded version of, for you, this combination of process and then staying centered on this of us, for us, by us concept is the way that you access your imagination. I mean, it's the way
Say that again.
There's some balance in you of knowledge of process. I mean, all this comes from experience. 30 plus years of doing it. Some knowledge of process and this center, this core belief that you got of producing art that's of us, for us, and by us is your way of getting over, accessing the imagination.
Yeah.
Getting into the creative mode. Which is the reason I keep bringing that back up. I think maybe if anybody watches this or those who watch it might, if they're creative or artists, that's always the recurrent mantra is about how do I produce? How do I get out? I'm depressed. I'm in a slump. I'm in a and I think you and I come from the same school where we've been forced to grind.
Yeah. There's a lot of that.
And so maybe that's those older cats. Speaking for myself, maybe that's the one of the valuable things we can pass down.
I think Well, let me back up. I think a lot of people, when they start to create art, or they want to be artists, they want to go from 0 to 100 immediately.
Yeah,
I want to be Picasso.
Pretty much everything.
I mean, everybody.
I know that's a disease, and I'm hanging with a lot of musicians too. That's a disease with songwriters.
Everybody
and
wants to be, their hero. They want to be as good as their hero, and they want to be that way overnight. And that's not the way the process works. Like you said, we've been grinding for 30 plus, nearly 40 years.
We made hundreds of dollars at it.
Hundreds, yeah. Like man told me years ago, he said,
That's from Rick Carter, if he ever watches it.
I know there's a lot of money in the art business. And they go, yeah, I left it there.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of thing. But going back to the creative process, permission is what we have to give ourselves.
Yeah.
And I mean that. And is that permission to fail, permission to succeed, permission to try, permission to do whatever it is that comes out of our mind. And if it sucks, well, good for you.
Yeah.
Go do another one that sucks, and then go do the next one that sucks, and do as many of them that sucks. You finally get something that comes out, and you go, "Wow, that's not bad."
Yeah.
And then you can expand upon that, but it doesn't just happen.
You develop faith that way.
Absolutely.
There's a Bible verse that says, "Without faith, it is impossible to please God." I've often thought you could definitely extrapolate that to say, without faith, it's impossible to please yourself.
Absolutely.
So how do you develop faith in your artwork? And it's through a series of failures, and also that I think over time you get that good kind of callous where you're just not afraid. I mean, that's the one thing you're not, is to be like, I'm going to try this graphic arts illustration and merge it with drawing and see what happens, and I'm going to do it big.
Yeah, I'm going to do it big.
If you're not familiar with Scott's work, I'm talking about big. I'm talking about 10 feet canvases.
I've done a few of those, yeah.
So you got to be fearless.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, there's a little bit of that. You have to trust yourself. That takes a little time, and that's the thing about just doing the pieces and doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. And then at the same time, I find that it's important to stay away from what other people are doing.
Yeah.
You may see something that's that's similar. Okay, that's cool. That's that, or this is that, and that's a good way to learn. But what happens, and this is where I get so frustrated watching other artists, is they jump straight in and they finally get something that's pretty good, and they go, I got to sell this. I've got to sell this. I've got to go into business of making art, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. Well, then that's where we get stuck. Well, okay, you say you do sell it. You go, and it's
your creative process just stopped.
It just stopped.
The imagination
Everything
part.
just completely stopped.
Now you're in production.
That's exactly
right.
And
hopefully you're producing something that's good, because if you don't, you're going to have a whole lot of
you're going to have a whole lot of crap out there. It's going to wind up in somebody's yard sale. That's the thing, and that's my biggest fear, is I don't want to drive by somebody's house and see one of my pieces.
There's old
work.
Scott Owen piece.
Well, that's one reason you make them
How
big.
How much y'all want for this?
Yeah, if you make them big, it's the American way. If you make it big,
so
they won't throw it away.
This is a great way for us to wrap. For us to start wrapping up. And to sort of attack this topic, and it's way too rangy for us. So I will disclaimer us both.
Okay.
Neither Scott or I are experts in this field I'm fixing to talk about. It's just two old guys talking about what we know about.
Right.
So I mean, you and I both talk about we're trying to keep up, and so we both know that this idea of digital art or NFTs as digital art is out there, non-fungible tokens. If you don't know that term, you might Google it. NFTs, non-fungible tokens. My premise is, after studying about it all that I can to this point, is that the digital art revolution, including the buying, selling, trading of, however you want to put it, NFTs, is going to, number one, add value to organically produced art. Is potentially. In other words, if the idea of scarcity holds up, scarcity meaning, I'll use the most simple example that's been used before. There's only one Mona Lisa. Mm-hmm. That's obviously the original is going to be the most valuable one on earth always. And so all reproductions of that, digital or otherwise, are going to be worth less in some way, shape, or form than that Mona Lisa. So the idea of scarcity is not going away in all this digital universe. So the reason I'm saying that is that every time I bring this up on social media or to friends or something, they buckle up and they go, well, if they're a painter, you know, they'll say, well, digital art will never be worth as much as the original. Well, of course not. And that's not what we're saying. But you and I think that in the world of blockchain and all that digital exchange world that's coming in some way, shape, or form, that we can find some ways to market art, to reinvent, to rethink how trademarks work and that kind of thing. What's your, without revealing any secrets, because I know you got some secrets.
Well, but let me back up. Let me go back to what you said about what other people may say or may not say. When I was lucky enough that when the true computer revolution came about in industry, I was there. Okay, I was hand painting signs, and I was the first guy in the Southeast to ever buy a vinyl cutting machine. Now, these things that people call crickets now. When I bought this in 1984, I paid $12,500.
Now you can buy one for
$250 or something like that, and probably get it cheaper than that online. So, and I remember very well saying to somebody, even after I had that machine that was cutting out vinyl, I said, they'll never be able to replace this or replace that. I was wrong. Okay, so with that said, my past tells me that my future, or our future, is beyond my complete understanding or my vision. Okay, but I do understand what NFTs do, and as a commercial artist, commercial being the operative word, was to make money at art. So I've had more than one conversation about this. Who the artwork belonged to?
A cricket that was $12,000 that cut vinyl, now $250.
Yeah,
and so it.
So now, with all the, is what I was getting at, is now with all the information that we have at our fingertips and all the design tools that we have, who does the artwork belong to when you create something for yourself or for someone else, even whether it's created digitally or if it's created by hand? I think the NFT program, if you want to call it, I don't know what else you refer to it as, is going to be our link to our AI from maybe AI to our IP, our personal information. Who owns what going forward in the future on every level, and not just, I mean, whether it's photography or if it's artwork or whether or not it's a writing or anything like that. We're pretty much all of us at some point are using digital information, whether or not we produce something on canvas and we photograph it, and then it's some form. It gets put in some kind of digital information. So who owns it? Is it Facebook that owns it? Is it Google that owns it? Who owns it? Well, we own it, and I think
we own it if this little contract's created. If it's minted, it's digitally
that's right.
minted.
If it's minted, I think, and I don't know where that's going to lead. I don't know if NFTs are going to be the end all, that particular thing, but what it does, from my perspective, is it gives us a way as an artist to say, this is mine. It creates the beginning of the provenance or the certificate of authenticity and these kind of things, and it says this is where it was created and this is how it was created, and it allows us to put that information together in one place, whether it's a file folder or whatever it is. So I don't think it's going anywhere. I don't know how it's going to look like. I don't know if it's going to constantly always be one of these things that people are going to trade.
To your point, when you started this conversation, it's folly to try to presume the next
absolutely.
step.
It's absolutely, and I've got some, and I know a good bit about.
But don't be scared of it.
No, I don't think there's anything to be afraid of. I think if anything else, then, and this is conversations I had with people when I was at the show in Texas, is that it's we should kind of wrap our arms around it and go, this is something that I need to learn more about. This is something, because this is the difference between, it's about the business of art. Okay, there is the production of art, and NFTs and these kind of things are about the exchange. That's exactly right. And if you, and I know I said earlier, keep the two separate, and they should be. The production or the process of making art is over here, but when it gets to this point of how I'm going to move it, that's the business of art, and NFTs aren't going to go away, or some kind of digital way of transferring this information from one person to the next. I don't know if it's going to continue to trade like Pokemon cards from now on. I have no idea. But it does give us a way to put in a digital form where this began, where it's at, and who owns it and what its value is. And I think that's an incredible thing to do on the business side of art. Yeah.
I think the reason I wanted to bring it up is the folks can look up a whole lot more informative things about NFTs from people who are actually experts. And
absolutely.
There's a lot of stuff out there on YouTube that you can learn and try to assimilate, what you want to about the subject. But one reason I brought it up is because we're two older artists talking about it and not overwhelmed by it.
No.
And so my objective, or one of my ulterior motives is for myself and for other people, artists I talk to, is just, it's easy to feel so fractionalized with your attention and therefore overwhelmed. NFTs, my God, what's that? And this and that and this and that. When in fact, finding your core and doing and whether you're a painter or a songwriter or whatever, and be aware of all the changes that are out there that might affect the exchange of art and that sort of thing. But if you can find the balance where it doesn't affect your access to your imagination, your creation, and therefore your inspiration, and just don't be overwhelmed by it, man.
Don't be overwhelmed. I think a lot of people think that when they think of NFTs now, that because this is what we're seeing sell for an astronomical amount of monies, is that they look like little bitty digital things like this, and this isn't my type of art.
Crypto.
That's not what this is.
Yeah.
What an NFT is a digital. It's a digital way of saying the crypto bunny, but it's a digital way of saying this is mine and this is how it was created, which is pretty cool. Like I go back to a lot of the things that I'm drawing now.
People should listen to what you said and just that one way to. This is for the people that are hopelessly right-brained like me. Just take that at face value and just say, I don't know everything, but what I'm hearing is pretty cool. I'm going to put that right here. I'm going to learn what I can about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on my creative process and continue to try to assimilate new information and see how that infuses into, who I am and what I do. But don't be overwhelmed by it, man. Just like it's pretty cool technology.
It is cool technology. It's going to save you. Really.
Just like, and I think that there's a whiplash, slapback, echo effect. It's like people's interest in vinyl records now. I mean, it's who would have predicted that? Maybe 15 years ago when CDs were all the thing, and then streaming watered everything down, and then all of a sudden there's this. Not everybody, but there's this column of folks who are wildly interested in vinyl, and because of its format,
right?
And it's an item you can own,
right?
And it's somewhat scarce compared to other forms of media, and therefore valuable to some.
Well, if anything shouldn't it be anything that's created by anybody that's the only one of its kind on the planet?
Yeah.
Whether it's digital form or not, or this concept or an idea. Just break it down for a minute. If we had never heard of the iPhone, and just Wozniak and Jobs had just put this somewhere, and then somebody dug it up in 100 years or whatever it is. And say, oh God, look at this thing! Look at what we can do, because we may have never known never known what we know now.
Yeah.
They dug it up and said, look what we could have done with it. Look what we can do with this.
Yeah.
Well, but who owned it? Well, these guys owned it.
Yeah.
So they still own it. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, a lot of effort, even in the past wars, have been fought over who owns
things. Property lines and who owns what. Think about. I heard something the other day that's there's this idea that the Mona Lisa may not have been painted by Da Vinci.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now you just screwed the whole place up.
That's right.
Man.
So think about it. Down. So if he'd had an NFT, we know it was done by Da Vinci.
Leonardo would have had an NFT.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that you have to kind of look at it, take history, bring it forward, and think, okay, what's happening for
some bodacious selfies.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's kind of what that's the way I see this thing's going to shake out. It's a way to validate the fact that we were here and that we created something.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Validate that we were here.
Yeah,
I like
that's
that. Man.
That's a way, because digitally, I mean, that's where everything will be in the future. It's not going to be all this paper stuff. I've got stacks and stacks of paper drawings, and it's important to me to scan the majority of them and to put them in some kind of digital form, and that way that I can say, or my kids can say, or whomever, my grandkids, great grandkids can say, this is what this dude did when he was
I
here.
still feel like that the more that we had a recital here the other day with some young, budding musicians, and so I told them that like one of them played a piece by Bach, so and obviously there was some clunker notes in there, and but it was a moment for all the parents and everybody there, and so the point is that particular piece could easily have been programmed by an algorithm or flawlessly. And we could listen back to it. And the value of that listen would be just that. But the value of the thousands of hours or dozens of hours invested in that practice and that performance and that experience, it's invaluable. And if you, and especially to those that were watching it, if you could capture that in some way, shape, or form, as people do with their phone videos or whatever, that phone video is not worth a dime to me.
No.
But it's worth thousands to somebody else. In addition to the dimension that's indefinable, I call it the fifth dimension of just the experience of hearing that performed live. So art's got its I say that in various and sundry ways because I think there's a whole lot of it's easy to get complacent about creation when you by some people who call themselves artists when they start looking at all the digital landscape, and it just seems daunting, and it's another way to reach this point of going, well, I guess I'll just do nothing.
No. That was kind of where I was listening to what you were saying. That's the problem, is that we'll do nothing, is that everything's already been done. Well, it's not. I mean, we are made like our Creator. He was a creator. We are creators. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what we are as human beings.
I think you nailed it, Bud.
Even with all of that, we can't.
I'll tell if anybody's not down with the scriptures and all that's cool. They can consider this metaphorical or whatever. But I think when it was said we were made in the image of God,
right,
it obviously did not mean we all look alike.
No, absolutely not.
It meant the exact opposite.
Absolutely.
It meant that we're endowed with potentially limitless creativity. And that's what makes
We're
that's
going
the
back to what
spark.
we were talking
That's the
about.
Imagination.
That's exactly right. Where do you go to in your head for all these things to come out? Well, you have to go there. They're there. Everything that I do starts with a line. One line that leads to the next line, and the next line, next line. So that's what we do. We create. And that's what humans are supposed to do. And in this world that we live in, we think everything's already been created. We've got people that are, they make our phones, they make our cups, they make this, they make all our equipment, they make this, they make this. What are we supposed to do? Well, naturally, we're supposed to create things. That's what art is, but that's what being humans are. I mean, we're supposed to create. We're supposed to do these things. We're not supposed to be just lackadaisical and watching TV and watching somebody
everything
else
you just said. So next time somebody looks at a blank sheet, and they're a writer, or a blank canvas and they're a painter, it's easy for that internal script to say. I think you nailed it. To say exact. It may say it some different way, but to say in some way, shape, or form. What the heck, man? Everything's already been done.
No.
I mean, you just get up here and screw it. That's not true.
That's far from being true.
Yeah.
No, if you allow yourself to be everything that'll come out of your mind, if you're not copying something else that someone else has already done, will be something brand new.
I heard this. I love quotes from famous people who are presumably much wiser than myself, and no doubt they are, but one I heard, I'll let you guess who this is from because it's so short. I love the short ones because they're easy to memorize. It says, let's see if I get this right. Life is a daring adventure, or it is nothing at all.
Absolutely.
Who do you suppose said that?
Theodore Roosevelt.
That's a great guess, but this is even more bad. Life is a daring adventure, it is nothing at all, was said by Helen Keller.
Really?
She could neither see nor hear.
That's exactly right. That's incredible.
So it would be easy for her to go, well, it's all been done.
But she could create.
That's right.
She could create. So that tells you that's the seventh sense that no one talks about.
That's right.
We can feel, we can touch, we can see, but we can all create. Every one of us can create. We were put on this earth to do that.
That's a wrap, dude. That's beautiful.
Thanks for listening to Imagine, Create, Inspire, the podcast. For more information on the Shelby County Arts Council, please visit www.shelbycountyartscouncil.com.